Today is the feast day of Pope St. Pius V. It's April 30th. You and I probably don't think about Pius V very often, maybe not even on his feast day, so this is an opportunity to do so. But he was one of the most impactful popes in the history of the Church, and also he was a hero in European history for being a leader of a military battle. He wasn't there in the battle, but he helped to organize it, the Battle of Lepanto. So he was a man remembered and celebrated for generations, and today is his day. We remember him. Pius started off life like King David did. Pius was a shepherd boy growing up who got the call to serve God. And Pius would serve God by joining the religious order, the Dominicans. The Dominicans founded by St. Dominic, who was a contemporary of St. Francis of Assisi. And when Pius became pope, he kept a couple of things from his youth in the papacy. Number one, we remember and have a sense of how bishops carry a crozier, a shepherd's staff, that represents they are the leaders of their given diocese, and the Pope leads the whole universal church. When Pius had his crozier, it was also a reminder, this is who I am, this is where I'm from. Started off as a shepherd, and now God has called me to lead the church. And also with his dress, he kept a simple lifestyle all the way through. The Dominican habit is a white habit. And so to this day, you notice that popes wear white. And that came from Pius V. He kept the white during his time as pope. He was pope from 1566 to 1572. And he had a major impact in a few different ways. Number one, he was the pope during the Counter-Reformation. If you know your European history, you know that Catholicism started to split apart. How so? It's called the Protestant Reformation, but we call it the Protestant Revolt. Those who were all in the Catholic fold, such as somebody like Martin Luther, started to break away and establish their own churches. And that's the beginning of what we know as Protestantism. How did the church respond to that? Well, church had something called the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, a very long council that had different sessions. And it was Pius V who would be the one to implement the policies of the Council of Trent. And the legacy of Trent lasted a very long time, and it's still going to this day in some ways. But in particular, our old-timers can remember there was a certain type of Catholicism in the first half of the 1960s that essentially was the same Catholicism that Pius V implemented starting in the 1560s. What is the legacy of the Counter-Reformation Church? Well, number one is the Mass, the Latin Mass, that would be the same throughout the world. Pius is the one who implemented the particular recommendations and any of the changes, just all the particularities of the Latin Mass. So that's when it got going in that universal fashion. Number two, the Catechism, the teachings of the Church. We have catechisms maybe in our home. And again, maybe the old-timers remember something called the Baltimore Catechism, which was teaching the faith through question and answers as far as why did God make me? Who is God? What is a sin? And he had all the answers. That's from the Roman Catechism of the Pius V time period. Also, he implemented seminaries, so there'd be official places for priests to get their training. And Pius V would support the missions. As Europe started to head in different directions with Christianity, Pius V and the Catholic Church said, let's broaden this out. There are Catholics in waiting throughout the different corners of the globe. And so that's when the missionaries really got going in the East and in the South. So those are some of the implementations of the council. Pius V is a hero for doing that, and the legacy has lasted. The second part is praying the rosary, encouraging Catholics. This is what we do. to unite ourselves, make ourselves strong, and if we're having any issues or anything threatening ourselves as individuals or our culture, turn to Mary, ask for her intercession and prayers. And that came from Pius being a Dominican. St. Dominic received the methods of praying the rosary, we believe, from the Blessed Mother herself. And so Pius V would pass along to the Catholic Church. He used his authority as the Pope to say, this is the answer to our problems, praying the rosary. And he would do so, making those recommendations. So he passed along what he received from the founder of the Dominicans, St. Dominic, to the entire church. And it's a reason why we Catholics still, all over the world, we have that in common in different languages, pray the rosary for our needs. And he's remembered in European history, not just with us Catholics, for taking the lead and initiative in the Battle of Lepanto. He was not there in the field of battle, and it was not a field, it was a naval battle. But in 1571, one of the major military battles would take place between the Christian world and the Muslim world. What was Pius V's role? Utilizing his leadership of the Universal Church, he gathered soldiers, he gathered a fleet, drawing on the different Catholic nations. He would gather the money, put it all together. It'd be 68,000 soldiers, over 200 ships for the fleet, put it all together and ask the Catholics, pray the rosary, and have Eucharistic adoration. Pray for the victory of the Catholic Church and Christendom as it was being threatened by an increasing Muslim invasion in the Mediterranean area. And so, on October 7th, battle was engaged between the two sides. Lepanto is area of Greece. Again, the battle was for control, total control of the Mediterranean, and would the Muslims advance throughout Europe? It's October 7th. Pius V, during a meeting, because he stayed in the Vatican, he got up in the middle of the meeting, went to the window, took out his rosary, and said, "We have won. Through her intercession, we have won the battle." And he said this days before word passed back to Rome of this victory of the fleet, the Catholic fleet. It was the cross against the crescent. And so, with this victory, he attributed all the success and the glory to the Blessed Mother's intercession. And so, he named Mary, Help of Christians. He named this feast day, October 7th, Our Lady of Victory. And later on, it would change to Our Lady of the Most Holy Rosary. And you go to Toledo. If you were confirmed up in Toledo and you have your kids or grandkids, go to our cathedral, or you have anniversary masses. Any reason you're ever there at our great cathedral in Toledo, you know it's called Our Lady, the Most Holy Rosary. And so Pius V has a legacy in our diocese, in our lives continuously. And so whenever you turn and pray to the Blessed Mother for any of your needs, remember, we had a Pope who took that initiative, said, this is what you do. She's the help to all Christians, and she's Our Lady of Victory. And so that's, among those other factors, the legacy and what we celebrate from Pope St. Pius V.